you'd like to see more of the same from what we saw last January, really. That was a fantastic performance. I mean, that was our best performance at Anfield probably since the Louis van Gaal era.
Another trip to Anfield awaits as Ruben Amorim aims to earn what could be a defining win in his Manchester United managerial journey. We are touching on everything from the football to potential Old Trafford exits and the ramifications of our latest Premier League outing. It is all coming up on the Theatre of Red. Do you hear that, folks? That is the sound of dozens of planes bringing many of the world's finest footballers back to England for the resumption of Premier League football. Now, even though it's only been a couple of weeks, you just don't know what you've got until it's gone, do you? And alongside me today for what I suppose we'll call an in-house episode is Theatre of Red writer and all-round Mr. Nice Guy. It is Jerry Kelleher. How is everything in your world, my man? You doing well?
Yeah, all good now, pal. Delighted to be back on here, so I've been looking forward to this, so happy to get going.
Well, you're very welcome back. It's always good to share a chat. God only knows we speak enough off the microphones, so it is good every so often if we can catch up on the official channels here. We're halfway through October, Jerry. We've already halted club football for 2 separate breaks. It's bad enough that we have to put up with this United soap opera on a weekly basis, but at least we have the caveat of being able to fall back on the well-oiled Irish machine, eh? What is your take on the international game? Are you a fan?
Yeah, historically, I suppose, growing up, I was a massive fan of watching the Republic of Ireland and, the memories of all the great tournaments of the past. I suppose looking back at the likes of the 2002 World Cup would have been a standout memory growing up. But I think recent years, I've kind of, maybe around COVID time, I kind of found myself not really falling out of love with it, but not having much of a draw for international football as much as I used to. I think Manchester United has always been my number one love. And I just kind of, as I've gotten older, that's kind of come to the fore a little bit, where international football kind of almost takes a back seat. But it's not to say I don't have any interest in it anymore, but if United will always probably take priority, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. It doesn't surprise me to hear that. Throughout the years, I've met so many Irish Reds. I've interacted with so many Irish Reds. That is often the case. I think a large part of that probably comes down to the fact that it's very difficult for the Irish national team to gain any form of continuity. That probably spreads back to a wider conversation about the lack of funding that's there for grassroots developments in this country. Because when you go back as far as Jack Charlton era, and everything that this country had and all the great players that were there, we seem so far removed from that in this day and age. It's unfortunate. I think more so than anything, the fact that you're midway through October and there's already been 2 international breaks, it adds to this growing onus on the players. It's something I want to touch on later on. Before I do that, when we are speaking in Ireland, I know that you joined many of these Irish Reds we're discussing in court during the week to listen to Andy Minton and the 3 boys talk it out on stage. Now, I was actually on international duty myself when that was happening, but I did hear good things. What was the biggest takeaway from the evening for you? Because I've seen many comments and quotes going across social media, and there's an awful lot of them being discredited for their authenticity.
Yeah, so we had a great night there at the Cork Opera House the other evening. Delighted to see likes of Andy Mitten, Laurie Whitwell, Carl Anka in the flesh. They're fantastic journalists at what they do. So I think what really came across was how down to earth they are, and for these really well connected guys, really humble lads, and I think it just showed the public of Cork as well coming out and pushing club over country, I suppose, because Ireland were playing the same night against Armenia. So I suppose that was my biggest takeaway, was that how nice people they were, and it's great to see them in the flesh, and it was a great night all around, and it was nice to meet up with a few of the Irish Reds there as well. There's a few top lads, so some new faces and 1 or 2 old faces as well. So that's kind of it.
Was there much about this? Because I know one of the most prevalent comments that came across was Laurie Whitwell apparently making reference to a comment that was there about Ruben Amorim and Manuel Ugarte.
what Laurie said and what the lads, Ian and the guys were saying, whatever said within the Opera House kind of stays in the Opera House. They kind of prefaced it with that at the start, and there was a comment about how Ruben Amorim addressed the team, and he likes to address the players together as a whole, rather than being more individual. And there was a comment how he did say to Ugarte that I had you at Sporting Lisbon, I know you from Sporting, and you're not the player you were there. You're not working hard enough at United. So that came as a surprise to me. But then it just shows maybe the character of Ruben and how he's not afraid to kind of say what he wants and speak his mind in front of the group, and maybe it's his way of motivating the team and the squad and getting the best out of them. But myself personally, I wouldn't be too taken aback by it. I think there is merits to making comments like that as a squad. It kind of worked wonders for the likes of Jose Mourinho in the past, and I think he's kind of cut from the same cloth as that. So yeah, that was it. Really, there wasn't many waves. I think being in the crowd on Tuesday, people kind of just took it at face value, and that was it.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot to be said about the dynamic inside in any squad, particularly in a Premier League team, because it's so multicultural. There's so many different nationalities, and sometimes what's good for the goose isn't good for the gander. And you're talking about a South American footballer, so it's just highly possible that something like that is the way of motivating him. And if there's anyone who's going to know that, it's a man who dealt with him previously in Amorim. But I want to get your opinion on something as a football fan. This is something I alluded to previously, but given what we've discussed about these international breaks, for those unaware, there was a large contingent of the professional game present through a host of representatives at the European Football Club's General Assembly last week. And one of the topics that is rising up about how there is a growing contingent of players that are tiring with a demanding schedule. And I think in fairness, this now annually increasing injury figure stands alongside those comments. The Premier League was well represented with United, Arsenal, Liverpool, other clubs there on the continent such as Barca and Inter. And amongst the many talking points, one discussed was the prospect of increasing the number of in-game substitutions. And that was to bring it from 5 to 6. Not only in an attempt to manage player workload, but also to provide some bit of water on this growing fire that is building about player dissatisfaction. Now, we've already seen the number of substitutions increase in recent years, and there is many that hold this feeling that has an advantage for numerous clubs that have financial power. How would you feel about seeing that rise again from 5 to 6, and is it going to draw a further line in the divide that you see in leagues like the Premier League?
I think so. I can't see it going down too well with supporters, first of all. I mean, we've only just recently had the substitute list grow from 3 to 5, and like what's going to happen next? I mean, if we get 6 substitutes, will it soon be like rolling subs in time to come? So that'd be my fear, that you can tamper with something too much. Like growing up, it was always 3 substitutions, and that kind of worked well. Now I can see from a player point of view as well, with fatigue and stuff like that, and welfare of the players, to maybe want more subs in game. So like, I think 5 is probably about right. I don't think they should tamper with it too much more after that, but then again, we'll have to wait and see how it goes. I'd be interested to get your opinion on this matter as well.
I think I'd go along the lines of what you're saying. When you saw the dynamic shift from 3 to 5, I can absolutely understand how a football club in the current predicament that we're in, we'll say like Burnley, for example, who don't have the squad depth that someone that Manchester City, Chelsea would have. You bring that to 6, it increases the dynamic, it increases the frustration, and it opens the door for clubs to voice their concern about the various mitigating factors that could ultimately end up in them being relegated. As you touched on rightly at the very start of what you said, it's the supporters that will obviously start venting this an awful lot more, and that changes the dynamic on the ground, inside in the football stadiums, and obviously the conversation that grows across social media. I do understand players getting a little bit miffed off at the requirements that they have. On one sense, you have this continuous debate that people will say footballers are paid so much money, get on with it. You know, stomach the even in terms of what Gary Neville said, if you're playing for Manchester United, you should be able to take this on the chin. But it goes further than that, because there's this expectation that stop complaining, stop moaning, you have all the money in the world. When in actuality, the amount of rigorous requirements in terms of training, in terms of traveling, in terms of the amount of domestic football, on top of the fact that, as I said, we're midway through October and you've had 2 international breaks. Even take Brazil, for example, and they were over playing against Korea and Japan. There's a lot of demands. There's a lot of traveling, going through different time zones. So I can understand it from a certain perspective as to how players will be getting fed up with this. And the biggest thing, and it was something that I covered at some stage last year, I believe, the rate of increase of injuries just in the Premier League alone year on year is growing so dramatically. I can see why the conversation is coming up. I do tend to stand by what you're saying, and that I think it's perfectly fine as it is, and we've already had enough of an uproot with it, that you could end up getting to this rolling substitute situation that you're speaking about. We've already seen VAR come in and uproot the very core of the fabric of the game that we love. I think they just need to maybe stop dabbling with it, stop changing it so much, because it's taking away the human factor out of it, and it's taking away the general love that we all have. But on a United specifically now, I know it's been a week since Jim Radcliffe was interviewed on the Business podcast. And even though I've digested these comments, I do feel it's fitting to just have a little chat about this ahead of what could be a catalyst of a weekend for Ruben Amorim. Obviously, Amorim isn't the most popular amongst the United fan base presently. You've got everything from his style of football to his stubbornness and unwillingness to comply with the endless demands of English media. But then we see Radcliffe remaining an admirer publicly. And even though he hasn't given him a free pass for the next 3 years, he's offered more than a little hint of support and backing towards retaining this partnership, ultimately building towards Project 150, while also laying out plenty of fire towards plenty of shots at typically sensationalist media. What are your thoughts in general from your side on Radcliffe's public comments about Amorim?
Yeah, it was surprising really that Radcliffe came out and stated that publicly that he may well get 3 years, but like if you're taking it at face value, I think it's probably a good thing that he's giving him his backing and he's quietening down all this noise that's going on in the media at the moment. But then that will be severely tested if we go and lose to Liverpool on Sunday and follow up with a few more bad defeats. Now, having said that, despite potential pressure down the line, I do think that Amorim will finish out the season. But then again, like patience is not infinite, and if we don't see a pickup in results, then something probably will happen down, heading towards Christmas. Now, having said that, I want nothing more than for United to pick up wins and performances and to start seeing Amorim's style clearly from week to week, because I think that's what's kind of lacking at the moment. We are seeing bits and pieces here and there of what we saw at Sporting. You can see some patterns developing, but I don't know, you kind of have to question some of the players in our squad, the IQ as well, because I mean, some of the on-pitch decisions that the players make from time to time, I don't want to go in too hard on individual players, but the decision making has to be questioned. And are a lot of them capable of carrying out what Amorim wants? That's the question I have, especially after the Brentford game there a couple of weeks ago. I was, like every United fan, I was fuming, and I'm not knee-jerk and going to say, oh, Amorim has to leave or whatever, but I think a lot of it is on the players. So it will be interesting to see whether Ratcliffe can stand by his comments and ride the storm a little bit and give Amorim all the time he needs to develop this play style and get the results that he needs to get United back up the table.
We have been leering very much towards this idea that in order to be able to achieve a successful playing style, to have continuity in results, and to appease the simplistic requirements of Manchester United supporters, that you maintain a style of football that is both pleasing but also producing points and generating growth up the table and competition in the cups, that you have to look inward first, and you have to look at the culture, and you have to try to alleviate what has been years and years of toxicity, years of constant change with various ethoses and principles coming in from managers and coaching staff, an array of different players arriving that might be suited to Project A but not suitable to Project B. But I can't help but feel, despite the growing contingent online that feel Amorim is out of his depth and that feel we need change to be able to see this forward because we have a squad that would suit a different type of manager, we've just seen it all too many times before, Jerry. And ultimately, it all boils down to me to the fact that whether or not you believe this Manchester United squad is capable of challenging the likes of Manchester City and Chelsea at the moment, this squad is good enough to go out there, as I've said numerous times in this podcast, with no coach and any random 11 players, and they should be able to beat Grimsby Town. It's the ebbs and the flows and the back and the forths that can see a stellar performance in a defeat to Arsenal followed up with an absolute capitulation against Grimsby Town. I genuinely believe the solution to the problem is a fundamental agreement internally inside in the football club. There is a certain level and a certain demeanour of what is expected as a player of this team. And if you can hit that and you're willing to give 100% every single week, it's like what Daryl Murphy said recently on one of the episodes a couple of weeks ago, that when he was playing, he wanted to be able to look himself in the mirror at the end of the game and to be able to say that even if he's had a bad performance, he knows in himself he gave 100%, because while acknowledging that everybody can have a poor performance, as long as you go out there and you leave it all on the field, then you know that in doing that week after week, the performances will come and the results will ultimately follow. So for me, I found it to be an absolute breath of fresh air that Radcliffe was willing to say this. And I know he didn't intend to go on that podcast and openly speak about this. He was pressed in multiple ways and multiple angles. But to be able to give Amorim that public show that we understand what's happening, I think it was absolutely fantastic. I support it totally. I do genuinely believe that we need to stick to one platform if we're going to see success. On the other side of it, I had no intentions of revisiting his comments about the Glazers, but I kind of have to here because there was such a sizable amount of emails sent through relating to what some believe is Radcliffe's continued support of the Americans because of his statement about their actions and their demeanour during that podcast. As I stated last week, I would be genuinely blown away if he believed an ounce of what he said. And I'm attributing that to the history of comments that he's made relating to the manner in which the club has been allowed to fail perennially, down to the actions that he's taken in cost-cutting measures. I do still believe that regardless of this speculation about the possibility of another bid coming for the club, that Jim remains as eager today as he was then to purchase from the Glazers. And I think he would say anything publicly to ensure that he doesn't damage whatever relationship they have before managing to actually acquire what he needs from them. On that line, would you go along with that? Or are you a part of this contingent that feels that he has let himself down further when discussing the Glazers during that podcast?
No, I'm not. I'd go along the lines of what you were saying there. I'd agree with 100%. I think, like, if you're in business with someone, you're not going to come out publicly and slander them and, you know, say all sorts of things that the fans want to hear, really, because the fans know, the supporters know what the Glazers are and what they've done over the last 2 decades. I think deep down Radcliffe obviously knows he's the one cleaning up their mess and cleaning up from 20 years of failure off the pitch, really. And I suppose there's a saying that if you keep someone sweet, then you're gonna get what you want, and I think that's what Jim is kind of getting at with his comments. And I do think Radcliffe's intentions are good. He wants, I reckon he wants to get the club back to where they were under Sir Alex, and he wants to build a legacy for himself. And, you know, he's I think he's 71, 72 now, so he doesn't realistically have a whole lot of time to do that. So he's obviously tried to get the right people in and try and build the club back up. Like, it's going to take time. It's not going to be done in 2 or 3 years. So we'll just have to see how it goes. But I do think his intentions are there. Like, he's not a billionaire for nothing. He's obviously had to make some harsh decisions, and you see that with the cutbacks and the redundancies within the club over the last year has not been nice to see. A lot of good people at United have lost their jobs, and I guess we'll just have to see how it turns out. Will all this sort of heartache be worth it in the end? And I hope it will be.
Allow me to ask you a very quick question. Have you heard of the black stuff? Now, if you have, you've never looked back. And if you're yet to come across this, then listen very closely. Regardless of the type of work that you're invested in or the daily activities that you get up to, you want to take care of yourself and you want to smell good while you're doing it. Well, with the black stuff, you can kickstart every single day with the finest handmade soaps, deodorants and fragrances on the market. They're all handmade in small batches with pure and natural ingredients that are gentle yet long-lasting. In what is their 5th year in business, the black stuff is growing from strength to strength with over 100,000 happy customers already. And on top of all the usual favourites, you can now pick up the Halloween Franken soap editions, which are backed by popular demand. If you visit theblackstuff.com today, you can claim 99% off a bar when you buy one. So with everything from individual items to the best bundles available, I assure you, ladies and gentlemen, there is something for each and every one of you. So do yourself a favour. Go check out the black stuff today. Having spent ample time chatting about many matters away from the field, shall we have a word or two about the players and a trip to Merseyside at the weekend, sir? Before getting into the football, there is a couple of our first team that are drawing a bit of attention at the moment. When considering Joshua Zirkzee, I can't help but feel that there is no smoke without fire on this one. And I say that because we're seeing growing speculation about a return to Italy for the Dutchman because of ample frustration about a lack of playing time, which is being touted as the fulcrum. When you peel that back, you can understand that from only 82 minutes of football across 4 appearances this season, he's got a cause for concern, particularly when there's only been 15 minutes coming from the bench since his longest outing against Burnley, and that came back in August. It's fair to say I could understand his frustrations here and his desire for regular playing time. But do you think that he has been hard done by here, Jerry, or is he simply at a level that is maybe beyond him at this stage of his career?
I think it's a little bit in between. He was injured for all of pre-season, and then of course we brought in Benjamin Sesko and Cunha and Mbumo. So again, naturally he kind of lost his place and dropped down the pecking order a bit by the time he'd got back fit. You're trying to play catch up. So I do see Amorim's point of view for kind of keeping him on the bench. Now, in a World Cup year as well, he obviously wants to get back into the Dutch squad. So I can see why he's potentially angling for a move in January. But personally, I like Zirkzee. I think he's a good footballer, really skillful. But again, I think what doesn't really help him is he doesn't have a defined position. Is he a striker? Is he a number 10? Or by his own kind of admission, he's a 9.5, whereas we don't really have that sort of role at the moment within Amorim's system. So, he's a good player. I'd like to see him stay, as I said, and I think he's got a lot to offer. Back in the last season, he was starting to play well. He showed great character to come back after being substituted in the first half against Newcastle. I think it was around about St. Stephen's Day, just after Christmas last year. And then he got that hamstring injury, which kind of derailed the rest of his season. So came at a really bad time for the lad. But you could see him going, and I think he probably will end up leaving, whether that be January or next season. Maybe even a loan and try and win his place back in the Dutch team. You could see him thriving in Serie A. It's a lot less physical nowadays. It's not like the Serie A that we grew up with in the 90s when it was the creme de la creme. You'd see players like Hoyland and McTominay going there and doing really well. So I think Zirkzee could do the same. When he came in under Erik ten Hag, I think the plan probably was to play him as a little bit of a false 9. Maybe go on that Liverpool template where they had Firmino and bring other attacking players in around him, but it never really clicked. It never really got going. And Ten Hag didn't really have the time either to kind of dabble in these different styles and different formations and stuff. So yeah, no, overall good player, but maybe just at the wrong time to be at Man United.
It's a fair synopsis, Jerry. It's understandable from both perspectives. I think I leer a little bit further towards him being dealt a bit of a bad hand here. We're looking at a player who had just been granted the title of the best young player in Serie A. You've mentioned a defined playing style and a role within a team. Well, he basically did that for Mignolet at Bologna under Thiago Motta, and he absolutely excelled at it. You know, he was that linchpin between midfield and attack. He was the individual that transitioned perfectly. And you saw that real perfect blend of his strength, his stature, because he's such a tall guy and he's a real big, imposing character. I just feel like he came to the club at the wrong time when the Stretford end is crying out for a proven goal scorer and a number 9. And then we get this guy that is a complete opposite of that. And ultimately, very much like Hoyland, he ends up becoming the target from the media and subsections of a disgruntled supporter base about this fella's not cutting the mustard, this fella's not at the grade. Another thing that comes along with it is expectations versus reality, and something that we've spoken about quite some time. Ultimately, I do believe he's going to be another product that has fallen foul of multiple incorrect decisions made off the field. I think that he's a fantastic footballer and he can benefit this squad in multiple ways. But I just think at this moment in time where the football club is, he's probably going to fall down as a what could have been, because there's no possible way he is happy with the amount of playing time he's get. Further to that, I would imagine, as you said, the club will look at this and think, is it beneficial for him to continue sitting on the bench? Or would it be more beneficial if he went away for 6 months, regained his confidence? And then you look at it in one of two ways heading into the summer. He's either an option that can come back and benefit the squad, or he has benefited himself while on loan, and it makes a transfer fee somewhat more beneficial for the football club in moving forward. One man that has been limiting his playing time, as you've mentioned, as well as Cunha. And he's a player that you and I have discussed in detail away from the microphone in recent weeks. You'll be aware that I aired my opinions with you about what I thought was a man enduring the pressure of a lack of goals. And that was coming side and side with his new teammates who had already clipped that little pain. And I think it was evident with quite a bit of his decision making against Brentford. Rather strange, he was holding onto the ball as much as he was, and really, really poor decisions, like he was trying to press for that moment. And the only thing that mattered was him hitting the back of the net and getting that off his back. And that ultimately led to Mason Mount replacing him in the starting 11 against Sunderland. And then Mount delivered a performance that has earned more than a hint of possibility for a repeat inclusion at the weekend. Now, Cunha was obviously away with Brazil, and he assisted in a 5-0 win against Korea. And then he played a little over half an hour in a 3-2 defeat to Japan. But interestingly, he spoke during the break about feeling the pressures at United since his move. And he's also admitted that a difficult start may have gotten the better of him. Now, given what we have spoken about with the pain of international breaks, I think this could be one of the benefits of it, because maybe the time away from England will have helped him to ease his mind a little bit. How have you felt about his progression from that outstanding debut against Arsenal to what we see present day and what I'm discussing?
No, I'd agree with your synopsis of it there. I think he probably has felt the pressure, especially after missing that penalty. He had a chance to win the game against Grimsby that time, and I guess it hasn't, like, he's been good, he's been impressive and showed some really good flashes, and I love him as a player, and don't get me wrong, I'm willing him to score his first goal and get that assist, and I do think once he does that, he'll click, and he'll be a very high contributor to United, because he is one of these exciting maverick type players that get you off the edge of your seat. And I think with the fact that Mbeumo has had a really good start, and he's got a couple of goals and a couple of assists as well, and now you've, like you said, Mount has started to contribute as well. He will be. It's natural to feel the pressure at a huge club like United. But I'm not worried about Cunha. You know, he's a great addition, and to have in the squad, and it's fantastic, isn't it, to have such a player within the squad that you can call upon to off the bench or to start. And at Man United, you need a big squad full of players with quality, and that's exactly what he is. So I'm not worried about him. He will come good. Good signing, and I was delighted to get him from Wolves. He showed last year that what a threat he can be, and how many goals he can score when he's on form, and all sorts of angles and shots from outside the box and tricky little finishes, and it's just great to have such an asset.
Absolutely, it is. I remember reading an article in 442 several months ago, and they actually had him pinned as the 10th best attacking midfielder in world football. That shows where he is, but at the same time, so many people think because a player is signed, he has to start week in, week out. And I think that that's a very juvenile mindset, because any team, particularly like Manchester United, you should have multiple competition for places, because ultimately that's what breeds success, because they'll go to absolute war in the training field to prove that they are the men who should be starting and who should be getting game time. It breeds into what Senna Lemans has stated. Obviously, he was impressive massively on his debut. I mean, how good was it to see a goalkeeper doing the basics in goalkeeping? But he's come out before this game and he's stated that the club has everything to succeed ahead of a vital domestic run in terms of the options that they have across the squad and the ability within the team. And that's also including the fact that we may see the return of Nazir Mazraoui as well at the weekend, which would be a huge boost to Amorim and his side. How important do you think players like Senna Lamans and Nazir Mazraoui are going to be against the likes of Liverpool, Brighton, Forest and Spurs?
I think they'll be massively important. We've seen with Mazraoui what a fantastic professional he is. He's just so calm on the ball, and he brings a kind of a calming presence, but on the pitch, doesn't give the ball away a lot, and he's able to dribble through the lines and start attacks off as well without being the quickest player. I don't think he was ever the quickest fullback, but it's what he offers on the ball, and his intelligence as well is a huge asset to have. So I'm delighted he's going to be back from injury. A little bit worried that he started to pick up one or two little knocks at the start of the season, but hopefully he can get over that and get back to the consistency we saw last season. He was a breath of fresh air when he came in. I think everyone knew that how good he was, having played at Bayern and Ajax before that, but I don't think anyone expected to see almost a Dennis Irwin 2.0 type season from Mazraoui. And just on your point on Senna Lamans, was impressed with him on his debut, so I'd like to see him get the nod again at Anfield. He almost brought a sort of a calming presence as well. With his kicking was good. He went long quite a bit to Seshko. And I thought his striking of the ball as well really impressed me. He really clean striker of the football, which was a change. You know, you see Onana was lauded for his passing ability before he came in, but we just didn't see that, did we, throughout his time? A lot of his kicking was scrappy and not very tidy. And the other guy, then the Turkish lad by India, he never really illustrated much in terms of passing ability either. His kicking was often poor and wayward. So it was just nice to see someone that's able to strike the ball well. And of course the cheers from the Stretford end when he came up and caught the ball high over his head. He was like a good Gaelic footballer there at one stage. So it was great to see just normal goalkeeping with no lapses in concentration. I know he came out of his box at one stage, but I think Bruno kind of got in his way there for that one. But overall, he was highly impressive. And like I said, let's see him again and see how he does in the cauldron of Anfield, because that's going to be a real different atmosphere and environment to be thrown into, and it's going to be a big test for the young lad if he does play.
I would mirror a lot of what you said, in that I think it's his position to lose now. And I can't remember the last time that I jumped out of my seat to applaud a goalkeeper claiming a high ball into the box. But that shows how it shows how much we've suffered throughout the years. As we know, that victory against Sunderland, it sealed 3 in the bounce in the league at Old Trafford, Jerry. But our away struggles, they do remain a very real concern. When you consider the task at hand this weekend, United have managed a solitary league win against Liverpool in the last 14 meetings. We've enjoyed some wonderful moments at Anfield through the years, as you put together brilliantly on the Theatre of Red website yesterday, may I add. Anyone listening, if you haven't read it and you want to catch up on some of the nostalgia that we've had at that ground over the years, Jerry put a great article together on that. It brought me back because I was there in December 2007 when Tevez scored the only goal in the league. And I remember that because I had followed the meeting in March that you wrote about when John O'Shea memorably snatched the 3 points. And that gave us 6 points from 6 at Merseyside in the space of 9 months in the league. But then again, I was also there to see the likes of Torres beat Van der Sar to seal a 2-0 defeat in 2009. All of that said, Liverpool have lost 3 on the bounce, and they are looking vulnerable, even though form tends to go out the window for these type of fixtures, Jerry. What are you expecting to see on Sunday? And I'm not talking about what you want in your heart. I'm asking you to be pragmatic in everything that we have seen so far. What do you expect at Anfield?
Well, being pragmatic and going off previous games in the last couple of years, you want to see more of the same. You might recall 2 years ago we went there under Eric Ten Hag and we got a creditable 0-0 draw. But the lads fought hard that day. They really dug in. I think Bruno Fernandes might have even been suspended that day, and we saw the likes of Kobbie Mainoo really come to the fore and take the game by the scruff of the neck. And we actually had a good chance. I remember Alisson had to make a good save from Rasmus Højlund. And so
Yes.
we could have won that game. We could have won that game as well, realistically. And of course, Diogo Dalot was sent off rather ridiculously towards the end there. I think with Michael Oliver, I think he's reffing as well on Sunday. So hopefully we don't see any more of that sort of carry on. But you'd like to see more of the same from what we saw last January, really. That was a fantastic performance. I mean, that was our best performance at Anfield probably since the Alex Ferguson day or the Louis van Gaal era that you spoke of there.
Yeah.
The lads showed an awful lot of grit and really went for it. They really probably should have won the game. That Harry Maguire chance at the end, whether it would have been ruled offside by VAR, I don't know. But that was a real missed opportunity. But having said that, it was a great performance. Manu Ugarte, we spoke about him earlier. He was fantastic that day, alongside Kobbie Mainoo. Now, I highly, highly doubt that's going to be the central midfield partnership on Sunday, but you never know. You just want to see a good performance, keep things tight, and try and nick a goal, and see how we get on from there. I really hope we don't concede first, because when you concede first at Anfield, it gets the crowd up and everything just kind of almost goes from bad to worse in an instant, and they can get on top of you there. So a nice goal early doors for United might silence the crowd down a little bit. Going to Anfield and winning it really drives me on personally. I've been lucky enough to grow up watching United throughout the 2000s, and speaking about John O'Shea's goal there in 2007 and Carlos Tevez a few months later, I remember all that, and that really stokes the fire within me. And throughout the bad times, losing there, we won't even mention the scorelines of some of the defeats there in recent years, but thinking back on those days, it really drives me on for more, and let's hope we see more of it on Sunday.
Oh, without question, despite what some of the noisy lot across town would have you believe, this is the fixture. This is the fixture in English football, and even after that, then you're looking at Arsenal. But this is the fixture. It is really the definition of form going out the window. So even though Liverpool have lost 3 in the bounce, I think that's going to count for very, very little. At the same time, I'm going to be hopeful in stating that if we can say that Liverpool's run of 3 consecutive defeats won't matter, then we'll just ignore the torrid run of away form that we have had and say that won't matter either on the day, because this is a new leaf. One thing I'd be quite curious about, because I mentioned Cunha and how Mount stepped in ahead of him instead of Sunderland. Cunha is obviously admitting that maybe he's feeling the pressures of this. I would be very surprised if we don't see what has been attributed as the worst signing of the summer in Benjamin Sesko leading the line, which I won't even get into now because I don't think I'd be able to stop talking about that one. But do you think it'll be Mount or Cunha to start beside Mbeumo?
Personally, I think it'll be Mount. I think he's earned his chance to start now after a real hard-working display against Sunderland and a really well-taken goal as well. Now, there's pros to starting both players. I think Cunha offers you something different. He can receive the ball deep and burst up through the lines, and he can beat 2 or 3 men in an instant, which is really exciting to see. But I'm not sure is it going to be the game for him to start. Maybe we might see him come off the bench later on when Liverpool hopefully are tiring, and we might see some of those lung-bursting runs at that stage and maybe use him as a bit of an outlet. But I think it's more of a game for Mason Mount to start. I think the good thing about Mount, he can slot back almost and make the midfield a midfield 3. So it offers a little bit of tactical flexibility there. But he was really impressive, and I'm glad he's started the season well enough, and got over his injury issue and seems to be in good fine fettle there now lately. So let's see how he does at Anfield.
His comeback from injury and that really calculated individual rehabilitation period that he was on. A lot of people don't realise it, but he hasn't seen past the 60th minute in any of his appearances, even the ones where he started. So he's really being managed. And I don't think that it's any surprise that we're seeing his best in a Manchester United shirt when this is happening. All of this comes down to the advances that are being made in the medical department and obviously what we've seen happen at Carrington. For what it's worth, I would agree with you. I do think that Mount will start beside Mbeumo with Sesko leading the line. It's one of those games where anything can happen. And the temperament of Cunha has been questionable sometimes at Wolves during high pressure moments. So you'd be rather concerned about that getting on top of him at Anfield. And as you said, Michael Oliver is there. If anything can be returned with that. I am going to put you on the spot. And given that 3 points could technically lift United into the European places and within a solitary win of top spot pending results elsewhere, how do you see this one ending?
You know what, Sean? I'm going to be bold and I'm going to summon the spirit of the Alex Ferguson era here, and I'm going to say we're going to win 2-1. It's a scoreline that's been it's good. It's a scoreline that's been historically the most common scoreline when we've won at Anfield. It's either been 2-1 or 1-0. So going to go for an early goal, silence the crowd. I do see Liverpool scoring, of course, but I think final 10 minutes, Cunha enters the fray and drives upfield, and we might see a late winner like all times, huh?
Well, wouldn't that be something else that you'd get Amorim getting his first consecutive Premier League victories at Anfield and Cunha getting his first goal for the club at Anfield? That would be quite spectacular, and I will go along with that. I know it always happens, especially after an international break, that you somehow manage to lock away all of the bad memories and you start focusing on what could potentially happen. You start getting giddy. I think you get Manchester United giddy. Even though I'd agree with you about them scoring, because even though Salah has been absolutely turgid at times this year, he does like a goal against United. And it wouldn't surprise me if he did score. But I do think 2-1 is a good shout, so I'm going to back you on that one. And hopefully I'm back here next week celebrating that. Jerry, sir, as always, it was a pleasure to chat with you today. If any of these beautiful listeners would like to get in touch with you, what is the best way that they can do so?
So you can follow me on Twitter. It's Jerry Kelleher 10, or you can follow my Facebook account at Cork Reds. Built up quite a following there in recent times, and I post a lot of Alex Ferguson era nostalgia. So if you're into that type of thing, watching old games and old clips and all the goals from the past, and that's the page for you.
100% it is. You built up a huge following in that. It's great. It's gone from strength to strength. So even if you're not from Cork, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't matter what part of the world you're from, I think you'd enjoy it. He does a great job on the page, so very much check it out. And be sure to like and subscribe to ourselves wherever you're listening today. And if you haven't done so, please leave a quick review. You can also get in touch on our socials at theatre_of_red and visit our website for daily content, which is coming exclusively from Carrington. So until next week, and let us look forward to Anfield and what I hope will be the defining Sunday for Ruben Amorim. Up the Reds.